Howdy, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about World War II camps. So this includes prisoner of war, or POW camps, concentration camps, and internment camps. We'll even talk a little bit about Russian gulags as well. So let's jump in. So the first one we're going to talk about is internment camps in the United States. This is going to be focused on Japanese citizens. So these are recent Japanese immigrants as well as second or third generation Japanese immigrants. And these are going to be set up pretty quickly after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Now this is kind of weird, but it's somewhat understandable for the fear people are feeling at the time. Pearl Harbor has just happened, so that means a surprise Japanese naval attack on our Pacific Fleet. So the United States panics and overreacts in this regard. So these internment camps, as you can see, are going to be set up all across the United States, mainly along the West Coast, where majority of the Japanese citizens live. Now, they find ways, in Time magazine, they actually publish ways to identify and discriminate between a Japanese person and a Chinese or someone of a different Asian descent. So they even gave like facial features and height, weight, and all these different kinds of traits to better identify who might be Japanese. So this is promoting discrimination. Now, anyone of Japanese ancestry was forced to basically sell their business, sell their home, sell everything they can, and take only what they could carry with them and go live for the duration of the war in one of these internment camps. Now, while these are camps, they're not like concentration camps. So while it's unfair, it's discrimination. These are American citizens being treated this way, so it's not great in any stretch of the imagination. But we do have to make a clear discrimination or a clear discernment that these are not concentration camps in the sense of the Nazi concentration camps. These people weren't being hurt. It was inconvenient. It was not good, but they weren't necessarily being hurt in any way physically. It's emotionally distressing. A lot of people lost their businesses, lost their homes. So not a great situation, but not nearly as dire as we'll see in a minute with other camps around the world. So speaking of other camps, we have kind of the worst camp, kind of the most iconic camp and nefarious of the camps is the Nazi concentration camp. Now this relates to Hitler's final solution to the Jewish question. So in his book Mein Kampf, he basically blames the Jews for the losing of World War I. And during World War II, when Hitler rises to power, he's going to begin a ethnic extermination of the Jewish people. And millions of Jews will die during the war. Now, as the war goes on and American soldiers and Russian soldiers begin finding these camps, what they see is shocking to them. People are being starved to death, they are emaciated, and you think these soldiers, their initial reaction is, oh, let's set these guys free, let's give them some food. But the medics actually run up and like prohibit and stop the soldiers from giving these people food and all this kind of stuff, or even letting them out of the prison. And it's because of health concerns. So you have these people finally seeing hope and freedom, but the doctors and the nurses won't let them out. The medics say it's too dangerous to let them out until we gradually refeed them and let their stomachs begin adapting to food again and get them a little healthier. Then we can start, setting them free and helping them get home and find their families. These are truly shocking images that we see. So people basically stored like supplies in a warehouse, given only barely enough food to live, if any at all. So you see soldiers starting to hand out a little bit. These prisoners aren't as bad off as some of the others. But then the soldiers begin finding the more brutal side of these camps. So the mass deaths and executions. These weren't just, people dying of starvation or being worked to death. These are actual systematic extermination. So this is a mass grave where they would have the Jews dig their own grave and then they would shoot them and just fill it in afterwards. So they began finding these. You can see these are not uncommon. Most of the major concentration camps had sites like this nearby. You have ovens where bodies are burned. So massive ovens. So this is, a series of ovens where humans are being burned. These are the wedding bands of people that were killed. Here's one of the most infamous camps, Auschwitz. And this is where we see some of the worst experimentation on Jewish people, as well as the most thorough extermination of those Jews. Here we have large gas chambers where they would pack them full of Jews and gas them to death to kill them in a more efficient manner. You can see on the walls the scratches of people clawing, trying to escape, even as they were slowly dying. Now, what shocked many Americans, American soldiers, when they came across these camps is the neighboring villages of German citizens claimed they knew nothing of what happened in these camps. While that might be generally true, you might be able to turn a blind eye and pretend you don't know, but when you see trainloads of Jews going into a camp and no people ever leaving, but new trains keep arriving every day, every week, every month with more people, you gotta ask a few questions. So one of the things that a lot of Army officers had these German citizens do, they said, okay, deny that you knew what was going on, fine, but you will admit what happened. So they had them go tour these concentration camps and see firsthand what was done to these people. They had them help carry the bodies of the Jews that were killed and bury them themselves and participate in kind of the rectification, or at least the honoring of the dead. Now, not quite as bad as the Nazi concentration camps, you have the Japanese POW, or prisoner of war camps. So you can see these guys aren't doing too hot either. So they're not quite as bad off in some cases as the Jews were in the concentration camps, but the Japanese were pretty rough on them as well. Now, the Japanese never sought to exterminate their prisoners, but they were more than willing to work them to death. So you can see both British, American, Australian prisoners were given just the bare minimum of food that could be allotted to them, and many died of starvation or malnutrition or simply being worked to death because they did not have the nutrition they needed to keep going. So in general, these camps weren't quite as bad as the concentration camps in Germany, but they are still pretty brutal. A lot of it comes from, just like Hitler saw and the German Nazis saw themselves in Europe as kind of the elite race, the Japanese saw themselves as kind of the elite Asian race in kind of the eastern portion of the world. So in Russia, you have a similar and different thing happening than you have in Japan and Germany. So you have Russian prison camps, you have prisoner of war camps, and you have relocation camps, as well as we'll talk briefly about gulags. So we got to understand the Russian camp system is not something new to World War II. Ever since the Russian Revolution, even before that, you have this camp system where people are sent, the undesirables of Russian society are sent. So you have prison camps, particularly after the Communist Revolution, where people who are undesirable, people who do not meet the ideals of the new communist nation are sent. So anyone who dissents against communist leadership will be sent to these prison camps. So this is where we get the idea of gulags. And basically, the goal wasn't necessarily to kill you, but the idea was you would probably die in this camp. You would either be worked to death or die from the cold or any number of things. Now, the prisoner of war camps followed this same model, and Germans who were being captured by the Russians, if they knew a US army or a US unit was nearby, they would actually run to try to get to the American unit, the US unit, and surrender to the United States versus surrendering to Russian troops because they knew what the alternatives were. So you have these gulags that were set up in Siberia. So this is far northern eastern portion of Russia, and the cold wilderness of Russia. Not many people wanted to live out there. It's a hard scrabble life to survive out there, but there's a lot of resources to be had. So the Russians set up what were called gulags. You can kind of see these work camps in progress. And the idea was to use undesirables. So this could include Jews at times. This could include racial minorities, the wealthy, priests, whatever was undesirable to the communist regime at any given moment. And you can see these camps are set up all across Russia, with the gulags being mostly in the northern portion in Siberia, or at least the more harsh gulags would be there. But all of these were set up, before, during, and after World War II. So the relocation of undesirables. So these were people such as gypsies or Jews or even other ethnic minorities that weren't seen as good or ideal to the new USSR regime. Now, there was never a systematic extermination, or at least not a purposeful one. But what happened was, whenever they were relocating these people to places that were out of the way, but the Russians saw value in, that someone needs to settle it, send all these people who you don't like to settle it. So if they die, no big deal. But if they make it and it works, great, we've gained a new territory and resource. The problem was they would move these people, but they wouldn't provide them with the resources to get started. So no building material. They would say drop off, several hundred pounds of flour, but not build any ovens to bake bread. So you have people eating just flour mixed with water and getting sick from, unsafe eating and living conditions. So there's a lot of accidental and incidental death as a result of these relocations, even if it wasn't a, organized extermination like the Jews were in Germany. You still have high casualties in Russia as well. Now, in contrast to all of what we've seen so far, you have the U.S. prisoner of war camps, particularly the U.S. POW camps for German citizens or German troops captured in the war. So these camps are going to look very different from any of the camps we've seen so far. So these guys look pretty healthy. They have good meals in front of them. They have, quality clothes. They don't look too hard off. Certainly not emaciated and starved like many of the other troops we've seen. This is more akin to a summer camp than a, harsh prisoner camp. They have bands, they have soccer teams, they have their own newspaper. Many of these prisoners could even go, so this is a camp from Hearne. You can see Hearne, Texas up here. So this is right near Bryan College Station where Texas A&M is. So this camp in Hearne, many of these prisoners could actually go and leave during the day, go work on farms, make a little money, go downtown, have a burger and a beer with some of their money that they earned. And as long as they never took off their prisoner uniform and identification, and as long as they came back every day, then they were fine to do pretty much whatever they wanted. And this is the weird part. In Hearne, Texas, a black man, a black U.S. soldier who served during World War II could not go and work for some of these farms, could not go and eat in some of these restaurants that a German prisoner of war, the enemy of the United States, could. This is the weirdness of what was done at this time. Now, on top of all this, its proximity to Bryan College Station gave these German POWs another tool. They were allowed to take courses by correspondence, so through the mail at Texas A&M. And you have a portion of these German prisoners graduating from Texas A&M during the war and going home to Germany with college degrees. Now, the idea was to treat these Germans well, make them love the United States, give them college degrees, educate them in the US model, and then after the war, when these Germans went home, they would basically rebuild Germany in the model of the United States, or at least to a degree, or at least a form of government that was sympathetic to the United States, because all of these soldiers could go home, return to their normal lives, and participate in German economy and the government and all aspects of life. And they would have been like, well, the United States is not so bad. They treated us pretty well during the war. You know, we got a college education. It wasn't too bad. So this gives you a breakdown of some of the major camps during World War II. Not all of them. There's a lot more out there. But these are some of the major ones that had the most dramatic effect on the course of the war and the aftermath of World War II. So I will talk to y'all more next time.